By far, the most commented thing on my YouTube channel is what are your graphics settings? So I'll be going through all of my settings and optimizations that I've done to make the game run smoother, but also give it a much more vibrant look. Timestamps are marked below so you can skip to any section you'd like. Let's run through all of these settings in 20 minutes or less. Alright, before we do any digging in INI files or anything on the back end through NVIDIA control panel, we want to first adjust our settings in-game first. This is because we're going to adjust the game user settings and then lock them using the INI file so that whenever DBD updates, your settings don't get reset. First one you want to go to is you want to go to accessibility. There's only, one setting here that's going to be visual heartbeat. You want to turn this on. There should be no reason this should be turned off. For lullabies, and then for the terror radius, you're going to be able to see the fog for the lullaby and then the heart beating with the terror radius. I mean, this just makes it easier to find the killer. This should be on. Next, you want to go to beta. I think normal FOV is 90. You want to set this to the highest. The more you see, the better. It's not an FPS or anything where your sensitivity goes all crazy. In DBD, when you're playing killer, you just want to see the most as possible. Then going to graphics, we're gonna adjust only a couple settings here. The rest we have to do on the back end. I would make sure I turn VSync off. VSync is horrible. It gives me input lag in addition to lowering the amount of frames that I get. Make sure you put the FPS limit to 120. More frames, the better. It's also not a super demanding game, so 120 is gonna be really reachable for the majority of PCs. FSR is a super sampling, which I believe is sort of like NVIDIA Reflex, in which you can downscale your resolution and then they'll use like AI generative processes to upscale it back, making the game look basically as if you're running at 100% of what your monitor can support, even though you have it like, let's say like 90 or something like that. Try playing around with this if you are struggling with FPS. You can turn this on and then you can lower the screen resolution. And then I would probably put this sharpness to 20. And then for controls, again, this is something that does get locked. So I would make sure you play a couple games and see what, sensitivity you like to play with. Same thing with run and cancel. Play with it. If you like it, you like it. Otherwise, turn it off and it does get locked. None of these bars are going to go gray or anything on you, but it does mean that if you change it, you'll play with it in-game, but as soon as you close the game and relaunch it, the settings are not going to be saved. They're going to be saved to whatever is on the INI file. If you want to do like emotech, which is completely useless, it's just a flex, then I would put your crouch to one of your side buttons on your mouse. I would put your gestures on the scroll wheel. But other than that, the rest of this is going to be personal preference. I have my skill check and I have my abilities all set to my other side button on my mouse. I would change your ability, active ability 1. I would change this to a different button that's not on your keyboard, preferably on your mouse, because if you have a lower end keyboard, you might reach a cap on the amount of how many keys can be processed at one time. And with something like Dead Hard, it really matters that when you click E, it actually works. And then that should be every setting for in-game. The rest of the stuff we're going to do on NVIDIA control panel and with the INI. Okay, and then for the optimizations that we're going to do outside of the game, let's first start with NVIDIA control panel, which for me is always open here on the side. Otherwise, if you don't have it installed, you can look it up either with the NVIDIA control panel in the search bar. If it still doesn't pop up, then you can just do Windows Store and then install it through there. We're going to start from the top and then go to the bottom. The first one is going to be in 3D settings, adjust image settings with preview. You want to click this, and then you want to use the advanced 3D image settings. This is the second setting. Go to manage 3D settings. Now you can adjust these for all programs through global settings, but I do it by a program basis. So I'm going to do program settings. From this left drop box, you should be able to see all of your recent open programs. If you can't see it through here, then go to click add, hit browse. Then you want to go to wherever DBD is installed. So for me, this is going to be through Steam. I'm going to go to my C drive, program files 86, scroll all the way down to Steam, Steam apps, common, and then Dead by Daylight, Dead by Daylight, binaries, Win64, and then it's going to be this exe down here, Dead by Daylight Win64 shipping exe. This is the actual game executable. When you have Dead by Daylight added, the first feature we're going to look at is image scaling. I personally have this turned off because I do not use FSR, dynamic resolution, or another form of AI upscaling. If you do use AI upscaling, which I definitely recommend if you are struggling for frames, I would turn it on, and then I would put the sharpness to around 20 to 25, maybe even 30. It's simply a preference base. But you do have to make sure that your resolution in-game or in the ini files is less than 100. This is because if you have 100 and then GPU scaling on top, you're going to run into performance issues. Just keep the setting off. For low latency mode, I believe this is always on, but if it is off, like for me this was off, make sure you turn it on. Do not use ultra. For max frame rate, I would just turn this off. This leads to a bunch of clipping issues. If you use a clipping software, you might see a lot of frame drops when using this. But if you don't use any clipping software, then I would turn it on and put it to 20 FPS. So whenever you're tabbed out, the game will run at 20 FPS instead of full. And then for monitor technology, I don't believe there's going to be any other setting other than fixed refresh. Otherwise, for me, I do have G-Sync compatible monitor, so I'm going to use G-Sync. Scroll down to OpenGL rendering GPU. Then you're going to select your GPU. Go to power management mode. For me, this is going to be where you use your global setting, which for me is normal. I believe there is a couple other options that might show up depending on your system. Do not ever use prefer maximum performance unless you're using this on an extremely intensive game. Something like Tarkov, for example, where you want to get as much FPS as possible. For DBD, this game is not that intense. If you put it on prefer maximum performance, every time you run the game, you're forcing your components and forcing your PC to use the maximum amount of power, which is going to degrade your setup faster. For preferred refresh rate, I would just use highest available. For texture filtering, anisotropic sample optimization, I would turn that on. For texture filtering quality, I would keep this to whatever your global setting is. This doesn't seem to change a bunch, but if you are struggling for FPS, maybe set from quality, maybe down to performance or high performance. For trilinear optimization, I would turn this on. For VSync, obviously, if you have VSync off in-game, you want to turn it off in the settings. Otherwise, if you have it on in-game, you want to turn it on here. This will be all the settings in the Manage 3D settings. Hit Apply. Go to Configure Surround Physics. Go to your processor. Make sure it's selected for your GPU, not your CPU. Go to Change Resolution. Click the monitor that you're using for playing the game. Scroll down to make sure that you're playing on the monitor's native resolution, and also double check that you're playing at the highest possible refresh rate for your monitor. Now, if you have a monitor that supports anything above 144 Hz, something like maybe like 165 Hz or 240 Hz, but you do not see it when you have the resolution clicked, make sure that you're connected via DisplayPort. This is because DisplayPort can offer those higher FPS refresh rates. HDMI, I believe, can only offer up to 144 Hz. And let's go to Adjust Desktop Color Settings. I personally play on 75 digital vibrance. When I was playing Apex and when I was playing CS, I put this to 100, but I personally feel like 100 makes the game a little bit too saturated for me. And then the last thing we want to adjust is set up G-Sync. If you have G-Sync enabled for your monitor, make sure you have it turned on and then enabled for the full screen or windowed mode that you're using. And then that'll be all we have to do in NVIDIA control panel. Next, we have to go find the ini file. This is going to be in local percent or local app data percent. Through this folder, you want to scroll down until you can find Dead by Daylight. Go to Dead by Daylight, go to saved, configured. It will say, I think, EGS or something if it's through Epic Game Store. Otherwise, for me, it's through Steam, so Windows Client. Go to Game User Settings.ini. Double check that read-only is turned off and hit Apply so that you can adjust the ini file. Okay, let's talk about scalability groups. This is the actual graphic settings themselves. For resolution quality, keep this at 100 unless you are using FSR or any other AI upscaling. If you're using any of those, keep this off of 100 and onto something like 90. Otherwise, you're going to run into some frame drops. For view distance quality, this is not how far you can actually physically see. This is going to be the level of detail for things far away. This is especially useful with the new Castlevania update, as they remove fog on basically all the maps. So generator pistons as a killer, you can see from very far away now. So I would keep this to 4. For anti-aliasing quality, strictly personal preference. If you want the maximum amount of FPS, put this to 0. If you like the game to look really nice, keep this to something like 3. I personally like to have most of my FPS, so I'm going to keep this to 1. For shadow quality, I recommend that you have this to at least 1 and not to 0. Otherwise, you're going to have an extremely flat looking image that looks really horrible in my opinion. It reminds me a lot of DBD in like 2015 or something like that. Keep this to at least 1. Otherwise, if you want the game to look really nice, keep this to maybe something like 2. For post-process quality, I would keep this to 0. This is going to tank FPS. For texture quality, this is another thing that's going to affect a lot of performance, as this is for all textures. I would keep this to something like 2 if you want to be balanced. Otherwise, if you want maximum amount of FPS, obviously put this to something like 1. I like the game to look good, so I put this for 3. For effects, foliage, and shading quality, I would keep this all to 0 unless you want the game to look, beautiful. In that case, I'd probably put this to something like 2. Anything above that is going to have some harmful FPS consequences. For animation quality, I actually don't know what the setting does. I've done some testing with it before at 0, but I don't believe there's any difference in performance nor in how the animations actually look like. I just keep this at max because there's no performance hit for me. Now, these two settings at the bottom were added with the Castlevania update. I would keep these both to 0. Automatically, I think they're both put to 2. These are going to tank your FPS. Anything that has to do with reflections or shadows is just going to hit FPS. Keep this to 0. The game doesn't need to be looking that good. Now, for this next block of settings, the only thing you really want to take a look at is something like the audio quality, which is going to be down here. Audio quality level 4 is going to be at max. I think automatically it's set to 1 or to 0. Obviously, you want to have more bitrate so that stuff like the spirit phasing can sound a little bit more accurate on your end. And if you want to change the quality of the PNGs of the actual UI, this would be under scalability level. I think by default this is set to 1. If you want higher resolution PNGs, set this to 3. And then once you're done adjusting everything in the INI file, hit Control S to save, then go to Game User Settings, right click, hit Properties, hit Read Only, and then hit Apply. This is going to lock the settings, so you can change stuff while you're in the main menu and stuff like that, but it will not save after a game restart. If you do want to change these settings, you're going to have to go through the whole process again, where you have to right click, hit read only, turn that off, and adjust every setting through the INI file. And then the thing that really pushes my game over the edge and gives it that vibrant look is Reshade. To install Reshade, just go to Google and type in Reshade or click the link below. It'll take you to this website, and then all you have to do is click download on the front page. Then you want to download the latest Reshade. It'll open up your downloads folder, and from there you can run the setup exe, and then it should be able to automatically detect Dead by Daylight. Dead by Daylight is the Dead by Daylight Win64 shipping. It is not this one. If you cannot find Dead by Daylight Win64 shipping, hit Browse. Go back to wherever your Dead by Daylight is installed. Go to Dead by Daylight, Binaries, Win64, and then click the exe here. Hit Next. Hit Microsoft DirectX 10, 11, 12. And then I believe it'll say something like download with all effects. You could just click yes to that. And then all you have to do is hit next. It'll install it. Once the install is done, we're going to flip over to in-game. Now that we installed Reshade for Dead by Daylight, we actually need to find filters to use. If you want to use the filters that I have in my YouTube videos, just join the Discord by clicking the link below. Head over to my resources tab and download my filter zip. Download it and drag it over to your desktop, unzip it, and you'll have this folder with all of the INI files or filters that I use in my game. Open up Steam, go find where Dead by Daylight is, hit Properties. You want to add this line to the launch options, -DX12. This is going to help with performance. You're going to go to Installed Files, hit browse. It's going to bring you to wherever DBD is installed. Hit DeadByDaylight, binaries, Win64, go to your desktop, and now you can either drag the folder in like I have here at the top, or you can simply open the folder and drop all the INIs loosely inside the folder here. Now when you go in-game and you hit the Home tab, you'll be able to select the filters from here. When you are loading up in DBD, you should find a loading bar come across the top and finish loading that says something about Reshade. I don't think OBS captured it for me, but it does show up every time you launch the game. That lets you know that it's installed correctly. Next, you want to hit the Home key to open up the main menu. From the main menu, you want to click on this bar here, and then you want to click on the empty folder. When you do so, you're going to be taken to the Win64 folder that we were just in, and you can either click on the folder that you dragged in or the loose INI files. For me, I found them, drop the folder, then I can click on the filter that I want to use. Next, you want to head over to Settings. From Settings, you can actually show your FPS with this option here. And then you can also set the preset keys if you'd like, so that they can be toggled by a hotkey. That way you can flip back and forth depending on what map you're playing, or if you want to turn the filters off. For me, this is the left and the right arrow on my keyboard, but you can set them to whatever you'd like. Now, after you've done so, you'll be able to play with filters and also swap in between them as you like. Now your game is going to be fully optimized with filters, so it's going to be looking great and also running great. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me on my Discord, and I'd love to give you a hand. Hope you guys enjoyed.